Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to, depending on however you may look at your clock or wherever you may live, this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share this video. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they really do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this middle of the night or early morning bonus upload, shall we? Today's first experience on the paranormal side. I've shared this story many times over the past 15 years. Some people have been very receptive, but most have not been. I'll give you the story of what happened to me and my father during the spring of 2006. Maybe it can help some. To this day, I still don't know what to believe. It doesn't help that my father won't talk about it. The day that Katrina hit Category 5, my mother was found dead. I lived with her in Florida. She was a well-educated and beautiful woman, but she had many issues that finally caught up with her. The death was ruled as suicide. Though I knew my father as an infant, the first time I really met him was the day of my mother's funeral. That was the day I was told I would live with him in South Texas and leave the life I had in Florida. I had just turned 15, and it was a rough experience. I could tell there was something wrong from the moment I met him, and he was smiling. I didn't want to go, but my mother's side forced it. So we drove through the wreckage of Katrina from South Florida to South Texas. My father, his new wife, my cat, myself, and whatever we could fit in his Ford Explorer. He was a commercial fisherman, and she was an RN with 4 other kids, with most around my age. It wasn't too bad. I really didn't know what to do with myself, but I made friends in my new home. It went well for about 6 months, and they divorced. I don't know why. They met at church. My father wasn't making much money as a commercial fisherman, so we moved into a small, cheap apartment. It was just us and my cat at that point. My father had family down there, but I rarely saw them. He liked it that way. I'll cut to the chase. I just wanted to give you some backstory to the situations that led up to what happened next. The first few months in the apartment with my father were fine. I went to school, he went to work. During the summer, I went to work with him, and it was good. I got a car, I got a girlfriend, things were back to normal. Eventually, my father starts questioning if I'm messing with him at night, if I'm putting something in the air duct and talking to him. I didn't think much of it at the time. Over a few weeks, it starts getting more intense. He starts coming back from the library with printed out reports on different types of ghosts. It starts getting more weird. Eventually, he has me putting my lamp up in the attic space because it keeps them away. When I ask who, he mentioned shadow people. He says there are big ones and small ones. He then proceeds to tell me that the big one took the form of his first wife and forced itself upon him in a rather strange way. I didn't know what to say. This behavior went on for months. He started disappearing more often. He would disappear for a few days into Mexico with what he said was a new girlfriend, and I was left to my own devices. So I'd have my friends over often and tell them what my father was saying. We would play little ghost hunting games like you saw on TV show Ghost Hunters. One time something happened that I cannot explain. My friend and I were watching the Discovery Channel, Bear Grylls, or however you spell his name. I asked if there was anything there to mess with the TV. Initially, nothing happened. I asked a few more times, but with more energy. I used cuss words in anger. Then the TV went to static. The cable cord had popped off the back of the TV. I can't explain it to this day. The cable was literally glued on to the back of the TV because the input jack was messed up. When he was gone, I started looking through his personal stuff. I found all kinds of weird stuff. The single worst thing I remember finding was a big kitchen knife in his nightstand. Anyway, it gets worse. One day I came home from school and my father's brother and sister were there. When I opened the door, all of them were sitting around the table. Instantly, one of his brothers got up and met me at the door and asked me to go outside. He asked me if my father was talking to me about ghosts. I told him he was. He looked me dead in the eye and says, "He has told you the ghosts are telling him to kill you?" I was in shock. He looked at me and said, "Your father's inside right now and he says he needs to bring you to the church in Mexico. Do not go with him." So I went inside and listened to my father plead his case about why I needed to go to Mexico to be saved by some church. He said he went to all the ones here and they will not help. Only the church in Mexico can help us. I know my uncle told me not to get in the car with him, but my father was huge. He could have killed us all right then and there. I got in the car with him and we drove to the border. Luckily, my uncle and aunts followed us and called the police beforehand. When he pulled to the border, they pulled him out and put him in cuffs. They drove him off to a mental hospital. My uncle and aunt asked if I was okay. I said yes, and then they drove away. I was effectively on my own at this point. 16, a week later, I was asked to go to the mental hospital. My father had something to speak to me about. While he was gone, I went through everything. It was in the glove box of his Durango that I found bank statements with $3,000 to $4,000 deposits a couple times a week into his account. Not money that a commercial fisherman in his position would make. He was stealing the money left over from my dead mother's estate. What he was spending it on, I don't know, but that's what I asked him about when he asked to see me. He instantly started crying and I walked out. The judge said he was going to release him. I told him to hold on to him for another week so I could move out. He did just try to kill me, I think. Anyway, years went by. It was hard to bring on my own at 16, but I had good friends. I joined the United States Marine Corps. Eventually I went to college. I've done well for myself. I've even forgiven him. I talk to him from time to time. However, he won't talk to me about any of that stuff. He doesn't want to talk about it. He says it makes him feel awkward. He was a very Christian man, a hardliner. I saw him about 2 weeks ago. He wouldn't talk about it. However, I didn't see any Christian stuff in his trailer. I see all these crystals and herbs in what looked like a cauldron. I didn't ask about any of that. I don't know what to make of it. In the apartment, I did experience a few abnormal things, such as the TV incident. I woke up to my name being called once and asked for weird noises like knocks on the table, and they were produced. However, I could have been hypersensitive to the whole thing. There are quite a few other things that I've experienced that were paranormal. I saw UFOs at the apartment as well. I could write a book about my life one day. Alright guys, so here is what I was thinking happened in this experience, what this poor kid had to experience. He definitely experienced a lot at a young age. But so you've got the dad who was a Christian hardliner, and then you've got his mom taking her life, but then they move to Texas. His new family, they separate for some mysterious reason. Then the dad starts seeing shadow people and hearing things. He was stealing money from his late mom's estate. I wonder if the late mom was, I don't know, messing with the dad, and the dad thought the only way to make it stop would be to get rid of the kid, or if it was some sort of Santeria that he was into. I don't know, but it's definitely a creepy one. Huh. Well, you could really sit for a little while and think about it. Today's second experience on the paranormal side. Literally, as I'm writing this, I'm hearing footsteps on my front porch. It's 4 in the morning and no one should be out there. You gotta be crazy if you think I'm going to check and see who or what it is. They're just pacing back and forth from where the steps to get to the porch are to right outside of my window, even banging on the wall beside my bed. My family and I have been experiencing paranormal things pretty heavily for 4 days now. We did before, but they stopped for around 3 months. They just started up again. So, for the past few months, my boyfriend and I started living alone together in a house we previously lived in, but with his grandmother. She moved out when we had our son, so now it's just us and our 3-month-old. It started before she left, though. We're surrounded by woods on every side, the backside being the thickest, and the 2 on either side of the house being thin, and you can usually see through them in the fall and winter. Neighbors on all sides, mostly being family, but to the back it's a long gravel driveway that leads to, I think, 3 different houses, so still probably a half a mile to a mile of woods in that direction. Anyway, we heard the whistling sound in the woods. Not like what you're thinking, but an actual human whistle. And it didn't seem too scary at first. We assumed it was some crackhead or someone walking, or something. But then it started bouncing from being heard on the left side of the house in the woods to directly in front of the house in that patch of woods, then back and forth and occasionally to the right of the house, moving inhumanly fast and never stopping. We heard that only at night, and every night for at least 2 weeks. Then on random nights scattered here and there. My boyfriend actually convinced that it was someone messing around on our property one night when the whistling was closer to the house than normal. He loaded his gun, got a flashlight, and went out to investigate while I stayed on the porch of the bigger of the 2 houses on the land, closer to where the whistle was at that moment. He walked to the tree line and said something to the effect of, "Whoever's out here needs to leave or I'll shoot," just in case it was one of his family that lives around here messing in the woods. He said he heard something rustle. Leaves on the ground too close for his comfort, so he shot at the ground in front of him to try to scare it or them off. Immediately after the whistle stopped. We heard it on different nights down the line, but never that close after that, and started to notice that if it was silent outside and we talked about the whistle, it would appear. I started joking that it was a skinwalker trying to scare him. No clue what it actually was. Not sure how long after, boyfriend and I were in a bigger house on the land, in the kitchen, about to walk to the front door and leave and come back to our house. There's a hallway connected to the kitchen as you walk out to the right, and straight ahead is the living room and front door. I'm walking behind him, and as we are walking out, I pass the hallway to the right, and I am facing the door back to the kitchen now. My face, right eye, was sort of covered by my hair, so my view was obstructed, but I saw someone beside me in the hallway. And it was normal for my boyfriend's mom, who lives in that house, to wake up randomly and take her dogs out during the night, especially when we're over and making noise. So naturally, I thought it was his mom, although all I saw out of the corner of my eye was a dark figure about my height. It was too late for me to move out of her way, since I was already halfway past the hallway, mid-step, so I didn't have time to avoid bumping into her. I felt myself bump into her and brush against her shirt. After I passed, I turned to apologize to her, but when I turned around, there was no one there. The house was mostly dark and everyone was asleep, so naturally I grabbed the back of my boyfriend's shirt and pushed him and said, "Go now." We ran back to our house, and when I told him, he said he didn't see anything there when he passed that spot. Then we had our son, and his grandmother moved out. Maybe on the second or third morning, being alone in the house, he wakes up and tells me how he woke up in the middle of the night to some almost demonic laughter. He didn't say where the sound was coming from, but he said it was a man's voice. I didn't really believe him out of my own fear, but I told him that it must have been scary and tried to comfort him. 2 nights later, he was off from work, and he was going to get up with the baby that night, so we switched spots in the bed so I could sleep on the side that I liked, that was up against the wall. I don't know what time it was, but when I woke up in the middle of the night, there was a sound of a man laughing hysterically. It sounded exactly like at the end of the Thriller music video when Vincent Price laughs creepily, but in a different voice, and it went on for much longer. So being half asleep, I turned over to tell my boyfriend to be quiet or I'll wake up the baby. But my boyfriend was dead asleep. The baby was asleep as well. I could still hear the laughing, so this jars me, almost fully awake, and I sit up and now realize the laughing sounds like it's coming from right outside the wall beside our bed, which means whatever it was had to be outside, either right at the wall or at the window above our bed, but you got me bent if you think I'm checking out to see who's laughing at 3 in the morning, so I just went back to sleep. Whistling and laughing have stopped since winter came, but have been replaced by creaking in the loft in our house that we stay in while his grandmother still lived there, as if someone was moving around up there. I can see into the loft from the bed and couch. It's a tiny house, and I've never seen anything up there. But 3 days ago I heard the creaking again and looked up there from the couch. But I didn't see anything. Looked around the house because I was alone and freaked out. Still nothing. I go to the door and flip the porch light on and look outside. Again, nothing. But just as I'm about to turn around and sit back down on the couch, something touches my arm. So I spin around, scared out of my mind as to what or who I will see. And when I do, there's nothing there. That night, I have to pick up my boyfriend from work. So I'm driving along this bumpy back road at 9 p.m. because I refuse to take the interstate. And I come up to this sharp curve in the road. The road's fairly new to me, so it surprises me, and I hit the brakes. And look in the rear view to see if there's any cars behind me about to rear-end me, for just randomly slamming on my brakes, and I see a whole figure of a man in my back seat against the glow of my taillights. I look at the road because I need to turn and I'm gonna wreck, and when I look back, he's gone. I rushed to my boyfriend's job and got out of the car and waited for him to get out. The next night, I'm home alone again while my boyfriend's at work, and I start to hear creaking from the loft. I'm scared, so I start recording to see if there's anything, and hopefully show myself there's nothing to be afraid of. I record the whole house back and forth a few times, and in the video there's nothing in the loft the first time, but when I come back, that's when I see a face, a white aura looking thing at least. I start praying and getting my things together to go to the other house and wait for my boyfriend, but my robe is in the bathroom, which is under the loft, but I rush and get it anyway. As I'm walking out, I'm looking up there and hear someone step on one of the steps, but see nothing. These steps make very distinct noises when stepped on because they're 2x4s. I just ran. I tell my boyfriend what happened. We go back home. We're sitting in the living room talking about it all when I hear something upstairs. Then our front door slowly creaks open on its own. We went and talked to his parents, and they tell us to ignore it, give it no power, etc. His dad's a minister, so he goes over and blesses the house and says everything's okay now, that we can go back or sleep over at their house if we're scared. We end up sleeping in our house, and the only weird thing I can remember from that night is that I was awake late, which is a normal thing because I have insomnia, like maybe 2 or 3, while everyone else is sleeping. And I hear tapping on the wall right next to my left. My son sleeps in a thing that swings, and it does make a rhythmic clicking, but this was much different, much louder, but very much in sync with the swing, and directly by my head outside the wall. The swing would click, then a loud tap back and forth for around 3 minutes, then it stops. This would have been last night, I believe, but I was up again alone while everyone else was sleeping. I was in the bed next to my boyfriend, and our son was in his swing by the stairs. All of a sudden, I hear what sounds like a broom falling in the other room, like 2 pieces of thin, hollow metal clinking together toward the kitchen area, so loud that I jump, get scared, wake up my boyfriend to investigate, but there was nothing that had fallen at all. This morning, the door opened on its own again, and we heard a few creaks upstairs, but nothing major. Now tonight, boyfriend is walking from his mom's to our house and swears he heard breathing of someone running behind him very close. No footsteps or leaves or anything, just breathing. I heard him scream when it happened. A second later, he rushes in and locked the door and told me what happened. We stayed inside most of the night. So that brings us back to the point of where I'm at right now. I'm still hearing footsteps on my porch pacing back and forth, then a loud bang on the same wall right beside me. At one point it sounded like it was on the roof above me. Then I heard someone take a few deep breaths right beside me, as if they were inside the wall or sitting right beside me on the bed. I tried to wake my boyfriend up, but he's exhausted, so he doesn't want to wake up, and I am terrified. Today's third experience on the paranormal side. The entire decade we've been living in this house, my family has experienced disembodied voices. This wasn't something new to my family, as our previous home was very old and haunted, and we heard children's voices on occasion. I remember one day after middle school, I had a friend over to visit. Once we were halfway to my room, which was in the middle of a long, unfinished basement, we began laughing together at either a joke or something that happened earlier that day in class. While mid-laugh, a small voice of a child emanated from the old rocking horse, which was off to the side against the wall. Sounded younger than us, maybe 6 to 8, if I remember right. He was laughing with us as if he was there the entire time. But he wasn't there at all physically. Me and my friend both looked at each other and ran out of my house with the front door wide open. Stuff happened to me before, and I've heard family stories, but that was the exact moment I learned it's all completely real. Friends have called me bad luck and have refused to sleep over. Things always seem to happen when I'm around that just creeps everyone out, such as small dusty handprints appearing on my friend's car while we're hanging out. To get to the point, things have now calmed down. I'm currently 20 years old and still living with my family. All of us on occasion will hear the other calling them from another room. We are no longer hearing voices of the others, but voices that mimic loved ones identically. I live in a rural part of Canada, and my city had been built over native burial grounds, which are still being dug up during construction. I've always wondered if that has anything to do with it. Today's fourth experience on the paranormal side. So I thought I would share this, not really even as a warning, but more of a way of sharing information with people that could possibly go down a similar path as me, with a wrong mindset, and possibly make the same mistakes I did. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural and paranormal, ever since I was a child, and my obsession began after reading Darren Shen books. Anyway, that's beside the point. So when I went to uni, I started getting into a lot of occult reading. I went to a uni in central London, and there's a bookstore called Watkins. Anyway, I would spend many weekends there pursuing the different occult books and artifacts they sold. Often they were very expensive, but I had gotten a student loan and had some money to spare to play with. Eventually, after many months, having read the number of occult books, I decided to get a Ouija board. Yeah, I know, I'm foolish. So, a couple of weeks later, myself and my girlfriend are chilling in my uni room. We've had a little too much to drink. I decide to bring the Ouija out and see what she thinks. Needless to say, she's initially skeptical and apprehensive, which made sense. She has a family history of extreme proportions with the paranormal, but that's not my story to tell. Eventually, we nut up and decide to try it. At first, nothing happens. We ask silly questions, and I try to scare her a couple times, as one does. Eventually, we start to relax more, and it turns into more of a game than true experience trying to contact the other side, in our minds at least. I decide in my ignorance to call out an entity that we are using, Azael, a name I had read about in some of the occult books. My girlfriend looks at me strangely, as at this point I'm kind of losing it, calling out this entity, thinking back and not really sure what compelled me to do so. I kid you not, my curtains start close, really slow by themselves. My wardrobe starts to open and close. To say that we both shot ourselves would have been an understatement. We ran out of there. We went and got coffee and talked about it. But even at that point, we're semi-laughing about it. Probably read too many books or something. I walk my girlfriend to her dorm, and I go back to mine to sleep. That night I had the most intense dream in my entire life. And let me tell you, it was a nightmare. I don't feel like getting into the details, as I get severe anxiety when I visualize too much. But basically, it was of hell, torture, and suffering. Years later, I've never touched anything to do with the occult, other than protect myself against entities that wish to do me harm. To say that dream I experienced that night scared me would be putting it nicely. Anyway, that's my experience with the paranormal. Take it as a lesson, a warning, however you wish. Don't immerse yourself in evil. Well, there you have it, folks. The end of this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps the channel growing and going. And, folks, what really gives people a place and a chance to share their experiences and theories judgment-free? Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.